Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sticky Notes Chat. This time we are going to be talking about speed. There's always the pressure to deliver faster and faster, and for our development teams that we support as user experience people. So, how do you balance that with still getting, what should we say, reliable and valid results? So that's the conversation we're going to be having today. This week, I'm on my own because Amanda is busy sorting out some kind of crisis she's got with the scheduling for a study she's running, and Cory is off having a good time doing a presentation for UserZoom, which you can't go and jump and watch that now if you're watching live. You have to watch this one instead, and then you can go and watch that subsequently. If you're watching this after the event, then please go ahead and also watch Cory's stuff on UserZoom. I think UserZoom's got a kind of a one-day conference going. And the beauty of that is it's free because UserZoom's basically using it as a way of raising awareness of their product space, but you get to listen to a bunch of experts talking about topics around user experience. So there we go. And so what are we going to be talking about? So yes, you're left with just me. One of the things I need from everybody is their involvement. So if you're watching this live, please, I would like you to give me your questions on the subject of speed. Tell me your experiences around what ways you've found to make it easier to get the team to understand your findings in a fast way and give them feedback from studies in a fast way, and how to run studies themselves in a fast way. If you are new to what we're doing here, let me give you some details. We are normally three user experience researchers who all also create LinkedIn learning courses. We got together to do a series of these, I don't know, hints and tips style videos where we also take questions from you on the topic that we're talking about that week. You can find us on Sstickynotes.chat. That's where you can find all the previous episodes. This is episode 21. So we've done several of these. All of them are archived up on that site. You can also find them on YouTube. We stream to YouTube as well. We have a channel there. It has a horrible name that is all random characters because we don't have enough followers on YouTube. So I don't know, maybe subscribe on YouTube as well so that we can actually get ourselves a proper name for our channel. So yes, you can also contact us if you want to. If you want to use old school email ways of doing things, then chat@stickynotes.chat. I'm old school myself, so that suits me just fine. You can tweet at stickynotes.chat. You can also tweet at stickynoteschat. You can also tweet. You can at us on LinkedIn as well at Sticky Notes Chat. But the best way of contacting us on LinkedIn is through following all three of us. That way you'll get notified when we go live. So that's me, Chris Nada, Cory Lebson, and then Amanda Stockwell. Like I said, just me this week because they're off busy doing other things. So yes, back to the topic for this week. And seriously, guys, if you are watching now, I want you to at least say hi in the chat and keep me company because I'm talking to an empty room now. In fact, I'm talking to a camera right now. And normally I've got Cory to talk with and helps us keep the conversation going, brings new ideas into things. You get to learn from all three of us. Today, you just got me. So let's start anyway on this topic, speed. Back in the day, it could take, I don't know, a good 2 weeks to get yourself up and running with a study by all the time you'd spent asking questions of your client, getting recruiting sorted out, and also sorting out what it was you were going to actually do in the study. Then you'd set up your study, you'd run it for maybe 3 days, maybe 4 days worth of participants, and then you would start with the whole analysis process. And maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks after you'd run your study, you'd get back to your team and you'd say, hey, this is what I found in the study. Guess what? By that point, they'd already, if they'd been watching any of the sessions themselves, they'd already have decided what they're going to do and made their own fixes. And what was the point in you even ever running the study in the first place? Yes, those were the bad old days. We've got a bit better since then. One of the things that came along was Agile. And all of a sudden, there was this massive conversation in the UX field about, well, how do people in user experience fit in with an agile cycle? We're used to running things which take like 4 or 6 weeks to run, and now we've got potentially 1 week sprints, 2 week sprints. how are we going to do our work? There's this whole concept of decoupling, or running in a parallel stream. So Desiree C was one of the people who came up with this idea of, and Lynn Miller, two people who came up with this idea of having a parallel stream where user experience would run in one run on their own time frame, and the development team would run on their own time frame. And between the two of them, they'd meet up at certain points to get the user testing done when the dev team had a build, and then get the results back to the team in time for them to incorporate them in their next sprint cycle. By the way, hi John. Glad you're watching. I'm glad somebody's here watching me. Good to have you on the session with us. So, and if you've got any questions, please ask them in the chat, and or any experiences of how you've made user experience faster, user studies faster for teams. Anyway, back to where we're at. So that's agile. This is a problem we face. What's going to let us do things faster? I have several suggestions for you. And the first one revolves around what we've variously called revolving door studies, or having trains leave a station at a certain time, a certain cadence. And this is where if you're working for a specific team, which is the situation most people find themselves in, or a set of teams in an organization, you pretty much know who your user types are going to be. You pretty much know what their tasks are going to be. The thing which is changing between each of the studies you run is the part of the project you focus on, and how developed that part of that project is. So for instance, it could be paper prototype, it could be alpha code, it could be beta code, it could be almost release quality code, or it could even be something which has been released already, and you might be testing it as a benchmark. But you pretty much know who your users are, and you pretty much know what their tasks are. So the idea behind a revolving door study is that you schedule a session to run on a regular cadence, probably one that corresponds with the sprints that teams are running. It could be monthly, it could be bi-weekly, but whatever the schedule is, you always have a small group of participants that will come in on 1 or 2 days during that week, even before you know what it is that they'll be doing when they come in. So you schedule these people on a regular basis, and then you get the team to tell you what it is that they need testing at that point in time. You work with them to say, well, what's new? What ideas do you need to test? Let's have a test plan that takes into account where you think you'll be in a week's time, in 2 weeks' time, where you think you'll be in a month's time. And let's see whether we can get answers to any of those outstanding questions you've got about user behavior. Let's see how well users can work with the implementation that you've created to solve their problems. And on a given week, you might have several different pieces of software from the team that may or may not fit together into one coherent task flow. But what I found is that users are very good, participants in a study are very good at working their way around or understanding what they're doing when they jump between different task areas. So for instance, you can give users a task that's where the interface they're working with is a piece of paper on the screen or a piece of paper on the table. And you can get them to do that. Then you can say, okay, now we're going to change tags, and we're going to be looking at this other thing that we've got, which is a piece of code that's running very clunkily in my browser on this page here, which now I'd like you to do this task, and then get them to do that, and then maybe even move on to a third or fourth task. And by having the schedule set in advance, by having the participants set in advance, you get the team into the habit of thinking about doing user research on a regular cadence, and always having in their minds, what is it that I want to learn from my users this week in the studies. It puts usability and user-centered design central in people's minds. It gives them an excellent feedback loop that's very short. It encourages them to show up, because often it's their piece of code which is being put through the revolving doors study during that week. And it gives them plenty of opportunity to see and interact with, to an extent, participants who are real examples of their user base. So win-win for everybody. Except, like I said, back in the old days, it would take us 1 or 2 weeks to get our study results out. If you tried doing that in this revolving door study situation, it's probably not going to work quite so well, because there's this whole flow of work which is happening in the development team. And as soon as they've seen a set of users working through a piece of their code, they're going to want to make changes. So the other side of this, the side of making everything happen a little bit faster, is producing results faster too. And there are several different ways of doing that. One of the things that I love doing is getting the team to do the results finding for me. Typically, you do that using some kind of tally sheet where you've got the list of tasks going down the sheet, a list of questions across the top, and normally a pretty simple answer like, did they succeed at this task? Yes, no. If they didn't, why not? How many times did they mention such and such a thing during the session? Did they appear to be, if we're asking satisfaction questions, what was the satisfaction rating that they gave on those questions? And by getting the team to tally this up, sure, you're keeping a tally yourself as well, but it gives the team something to do as they're watching the session. It means they pay attention rather than talking amongst themselves. And it also means that they're helping create the results, so they want to be part of the results process. Other things I've done is had pictures of the interface stuck up on the wall and a set of post-it notes that they can stick on the interface. They can write an issue and stick it on the interface. So that if you've got that whole task flow on the wall, you end up with a bunch of sticky notes saying, well, this bit worked well, people had problems with this. And then as a group, you can just stand by the wall and you can walk through with them what they found in the different sessions. And immediately you're in a position to help manage their expectations about what they might want to do as solutions, but talk through what the potential solutions are without having to write a report or do anything any more complex than just talking through the data that you've got. This is the concept of information radiators, which is these pieces of stuff, documentation or paperwork on the wall that helps people understand a process. I found that having the interface with these sticky notes on is an awesome information radiator. It's something which you can use during the session. It's something you could always take from wherever you run the session, pin it up on the wall wherever the team's working. That might be virtually these days, but the same thing still applies, so people can see exactly what happened. It doesn't stop the need for user researchers to still write reports, because I think there's a great value in having a data corpus, a set of information that you've got about what you do and how you've run research in the past, that you can go back to and the team can go back to find out commonalities across time. But that's not the thing the team's using. The report you write isn't the thing the team's using. The team's using the conversation you have with them and the artifacts that you created, like the tally sheet or the printout of the interface on the wall, to help them understand what it might be that they do next to fix those things in the interface. So, have any of you done a similar thing? Have you ever run revolving door studies? Have you ever done anything where it takes, where you've got a cadence that you run your usability sessions with, and then you don't necessarily know what you're going to be running during those sessions until maybe even a day before the sessions themselves? If you have, let me know in the chat. We can talk about it some more. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. So we talked about revolving door studies. The thing about this is that it's part of this concept of doing multiple incremental studies. Two things that we look for when we do research is reliability and validity. Validity is my study closely enough representing real life situations that I can generalize from my study results to real life? And there's lots of things we do to try and keep that to keep studies as valid as possible. Things like running studies in the person's place of work is one way of doing it, because then you have ecological validity. It's the validity of being in the place they normally work. If we're bringing them into a lab environment, then often we try to keep some validity by making sure that the tasks are the same, making sure that the data that they're using, that participants are using in a task, is realistic data that they'd be using in everyday life. So those are the kind of things you do to keep the validity going. But the other side of things is reliability. Am I getting the same? If I run this study again, am I getting the same results as I did before? Is this study telling me truth about the situation that I'm looking at? And that's the problem that you might face by having small sample sizes, and just running small parts of your interface through this process. But having these revolving door studies and doing them week after week after week after week, you end up with a lot of different information. And you can sum it up across all of these different sessions to the point where you can be a lot more confident in the reliability of what you're doing over time. Now, obviously, the team's responding to one individual session, and they are in a position where they're saying, we want to make changes based on this one thing. But this is where having their involvement over time also helps, because you can say to them, hey, wait a minute, do you remember a couple of weeks back when we did a similar thing and we saw this behavior? And now this time we're doing the same kind of task and we're seeing this behavior. What is it that's changed between those two things? Is it the interface? Is it our participants? Is it the task? And by pulling in information from previous studies, which are close enough in the past that people remember them, then you've got the chance to build up this reliability over time. So John is asking, let me put this up on the screen. Do I feel that evaluative studies are under more pressure for speed, whereas generative studies are looked at as okay to be slower? Oh, good question. First off, what's an evaluative study? What's a generative study? So evaluative studies are ones where you are looking at a piece of software that you are developing with the aim of making that better. That's the typical usability test. Generative studies are the ones where you are looking for information about what people do. You might be more likely to do an evaluative study in a lab environment. You might be more likely to do a generative study in a realistic environment by going out to watch people where they work, because you want to get more of that ecological validity during a generative study, what I just talked about before. So is there more pressure for speed in evaluative studies? I would say, John, I'm not sure whether you agree, but yeah. I mean, one of the things about evaluative studies is there's a whole team watching you, watching their baby being told it's ugly by a bunch of participants. And of course they want the results fast, because they're going to be trying to make changes to the code to make it better, and they're on a schedule for delivery, a deadline for delivery. So I absolutely feel that there is more pressure for evaluative studies. I also think I would plan my generative studies in a different way. If I'm looking to find more information about my participant, my user group, I want to know, I've got certain questions I'm going to ask, and there's a whole bunch of unknowns where I don't know what I don't know about this group of people. So I might be running a set of interviews, I might be running a set of site visits, I might be watching competitor studies where I bring people in to play with a competitor's product, I might be bringing people in to watch them working with a previous version of my team working on. In all those situations, there's less pressure because the questions that you're trying to answer are not ones that the team needs answers to this product cycle before they've finished working on these feature areas of the product. So yeah, much less pressure. But and I think I'd want to spend more time in those situations thinking about, am I doing exactly the right kind of study? Am I really getting my validity as high as it can be for this kind of stuff? Because those generative pieces of work are the ones which are the foundation for everything else you do. So they need to be right. They need to be accurate. If you happen to have a slight slip up during one of your evaluative sessions where you're just testing a piece of the product and you may be, say, a leading question to your participants, it's not enough other data that you can then you can recover from that. But if you make a mistake like that in your generative studies, whoa, then you've got a problem, because you're building your whole foundation of what your product design is going to be based on something that's not true because you put words in somebody's mouth. John's saying that makes a ton of sense. Whew, I made sense. That's impressive. Ina's asking a question about the list of tasks. Yes, this is a great benefit. The people on the team that you're working with can see and can recognize what's their contribution to the result. So they're in a position where all of a sudden they're not just some random onlooker for your user sessions, your testing sessions. They're part of the process. Another thing I didn't mention is the team should be involved in creating the tasks in the first place. It's up to the team to tell you what it is that they care to test, especially if they're working on, let's use that word, something like a lean environment where they're using a test and learn kind of approach. Then they're really going to want to have a set of questions which they answer on a regular basis to see how they're progressing over time. But they're going to have specific questions, specific hypotheses at certain points in time. And although this isn't unit testing where you're doing a story with a test for the story, this is kind of more, it's along the same lines. There's a set of questions that the team wants answered. You're in a position to answer some of those questions for them, especially ones around user behavior. So yeah, the team should be involved in writing those tasks. You're the person who turns them into ones that you could actually put in front of a participant rather than how the team might ask it themselves. But at that point, the rest of the team really do get involved and they do recognize their contribution and they're invested in the outcome, which is a wonderful way of doing things. Just want to say hi to a couple of people who've joined as well. Maddie, hi, thanks for joining. And thank you again. Oh, another thing that Anna's saying, you guys are really saving me this time. I mean, as you've noticed, one of this, Cory is off doing another presentation, and Amanda has got some participant scheduling crises, so she's busy doing crazy stuff to get her work schedule back on track. So you guys are really helping me out with these questions. Thanks for asking these. Ina's saying about a list of tasks or a list of cases that have been done. Workers can see and recognize their contribution to the result, so it's important for increasing their motivation. Yeah, if the people who are involved in the team don't see benefit in what you're doing, then why would they get involved? Why would they even help you with making special builds for you to usability test? Why would they want to take part in any of this? If they're the people whose tasks are being tested, then of course they're going to be interested. Of course they're going to be invested in the process. So this is the kind of thing that can really make a difference if you're trying to test on a fast schedule, and if you're also trying to get the team involved in the process at the same time. Pizza never hurts. Amanda in a previous session also said she would half bake banana bread beforehand and then finish baking it at work in a little toaster oven, and then the smell of banana bread was wafting through the office, so everybody would turn up to her sessions. I remember at a company I worked at previously, we'd always have pizza at these sessions. There'd be ones held over lunchtime. Another thing that we did in that organization was we took the chance of using these revolving door studies to do special events. So for instance, one time, and this sounds terrible because I'm going to say one time we actually decided that for a couple of weeks we'd schedule people who had certain disabilities to see how they could perform with the software. It sounds terrible that this was a special event rather than part of what the software was being put through as a regular basis. But to be honest, this was many years ago, and it was also in a situation where the team just were not aware of any of the issues around accessibility to the level that we are today. So bringing people in who had accessibility concerns was a great way of helping the team understand that they were not their users. They were a group of different people who had different requirements of the software and of the environment the software was in. So yeah, there's all sorts of opportunities with these revolving door studies to do interesting stuff that promotes the studies as a thing people should be coming and watching. Having pizza available over lunchtime always helps, having cookies available. Especially in an office environment where there's a lot of people who are hungry developers. Of course, now that we're remote, that brings up a different issue, which is how do you get people involved while you're remote? And I think it does, again, go back to making sure that everybody who who you want to be involved has had a say in what's happening during the session. Did they help you write the tasks? Did they agree that these are the right kind of participants that should be involved in these kind of studies? Have they got specific questions that you're trying to answer for them in this week's revolving door studies? All those things mean that they want to be part of what's going on, and that increases their investment, and also makes it much more likely that they're going to be paying attention to the results of what you come up with. And that brings that. So I already talked a little bit about results. I think there's one more thing we can say around that, which is around the how you share the results back with the team, and then how you archive those results for later. Because if you're trying to do things quickly, you don't want to be spending a bunch of time doing the write-up from these kind of studies. When I've run them in this way in the past, I've had a template form which I fill in for the generic parts of the study, and then just add the results that were interesting or different for this particular iteration of what we were doing, this particular episode. So there would be parts which are always the same. For instance, these revolving door studies only run if you only work well if you already know who your user types are, if you have personas or some kind of recruiting criteria for 1, 2, or maybe 3 different user types that you would bring in for these sessions. And it might be that you even alternate the user types between weeks, so that one week you're running user type 1, 1 week, the next week, well, the next time you do it in 2 weeks' time, you might be running user type 2. You always have an option to see these different groups in action, or maybe you do half of user type 1, half of user type 2 per session. But knowing who these users are and having your personas for these users is a way of making sure you can do that. Another thing I said at the beginning is you should always know what your tasks are, which sounds strange because if you're evaluating different parts of the product at different points in time, how can you be sure that the tasks can be the same? Well, theoretically, you should know what people want to do with each part of your product. Excuse me. So you should also be able to write tasks around each of those parts of the product and what users' intentions are. So then when it comes time to writing your usability tasks, you should have those pretty much set up for you, and you can just pull from them. Obviously, if you're running on an alpha build of the software, it might not do half the stuff that it's supposed to do. That doesn't stop you using the same task as the basis for your question in your session that you want participants to do. And then when they get to the point where the whole alpha build is going to blow up, if they click the button, you say, okay, I'd like you to stop there for a minute and tell me what you think should happen next. And that way, that stops them from blowing up your whole build and going into uncharted territory, and it still lets you learn interesting things from your user base about what they expect your software to be doing in different situations. So yeah, there's plenty of opportunities to be economical in how you run these studies by having stuff set up in advance: a list of personas, a list of tasks, a recruiting criteria that you use on a regular basis, and then the only thing which is a variable during each week is which things you actually test from the product, and that depends on what the team's working on at that time. So then sharing the results is equally templatized, I guess. There's stuff which is always the same: the list of users and the kind of tasks they're performing. The things which are different is what particular question did the team want answered at this point, and then what was the answer to that question. And so there's a lot of stuff in a lot of study reports which is very generic. It's the stuff that says who the users were, how you recruited them, all that kind of thing in an old school study report. In this new way of doing things, all you really need to do is say, here's the questions we wanted to answer, here's the answer to them, and here's why. The why is because it allows you to describe to the team why you think a certain thing is a certain way. And remember, this shouldn't be a report this report itself isn't necessarily the thing that the team's going to be using. You're working with them face to face or in a conversation to say what you as a team think should happen as a result. The report you're writing now is kind of a documentation of what that was and why you as a user researcher think that that's a good way forward, or may have some potential issues moving forward. That way, when you come back to your report in a year's time, or when somebody else takes on your role and has to get up to speed with everything in your interface and everything that you've run studies on in the past, they can quickly go through what the question was, what the result was, and why that was a situation. And the other thing that I love putting in this style of report is screenshots, because you need to know what the interface looked like at that point in time. And you might be wondering, why am I even doing this? Why would I bother doing all this report writing if nobody's ever really going to read it? Well, there are reasons for doing it. I, for quite a long time in my career, quite a long time in software development times, like 3 or 4 years, was working on various different chat and messaging and community products. And over that time, we amassed, I don't know, a lot of different studies in different formats on different products. But I went back to them all and pulled out a list of more generic findings around what it takes to do chat, what it takes to do community well. And I could do that because I had all these reports to go back to, and I had findings, I had questions, I had findings, and then I had screenshots, so I could say why it might be that one study found one result and another study found a different result, because they were working with different products. One might have had a graphical chat interface, one might have been much more textual, one might have had the chat history scrolling up on the screen, the other one might not have had it quite as visible. For instance, those could be things which led to people's behaviors being different. Knowing this by looking at the interfaces meant I could easily write a report which was super helpful to the team, because it summarized, let's say, almost 100 studies down to one document which just had all the nuggets of good information in that they could then use for helping them as almost a set of design guidelines for building subsequent chat product releases. So yeah, there is a reason for writing these reports, but it's not the thing the team's using. So what's the team using? Well, we already mentioned sticking the pictures of the interface up on the wall as the session's going along so that the team can stick sticky notes on. And just to be clear, you can do this remotely just the same as you can in person. There's plenty of tools out there that let you stick virtual sticky notes on virtual images of your screenshots. So yeah, things have changed because we're working remotely, but they haven't changed that much. The same situation, the same concept still applies. You can have the team tallying results for you. You can even have them tallying the number of positive versus negative words that people use to describe areas of the project, if you really want to. That leads to some arguments among the team. Was that positive? Was that negative? But it's an interesting way, again, of keeping the team paying attention during the session by having them be active observers of what's going on. And there are many other different ways that you can share your results. The other thing I'll say is, if the team has a communication platform they're using for sharing bugs, that's probably not the one where your results go, because results aren't all bugs. But if they're using something as a bug database, I'm not going to mention any names because everybody uses different ones these days, then that's not where your results from your usability study go. That when you've agreed with the team that a thing is an issue, if you've got good enough standing on the team that you are seen as a participant in the team and you have access to raise bugs, then maybe that's where you put the issues that you and the team have decided are real issues in the database. But the results themselves go in your own database so that you can pull on them later as you need to. Any questions on what we've been talking about so far? I had some great questions just now, and everybody's gone really quiet. So yeah, at this point, I'm going to open things up for other people to ask questions about doing things fast in a user research setting. It's something which, having started in the days when we could have spent easily 6 weeks from planning to reporting on a study, it's amazing to me that we can turn around studies in a couple of days these days. You can recruit people online. You can you can run your study in person, not in person studies, but real-time studies with participants in a matter of a couple of days, and then you can get the results out very quickly to a team. Oh, we should mention participant numbers for each of these things. If you're doing weekly or bi-weekly or monthly revolving door studies, you don't need that many people per session. Running 8 people, maybe 10 people is sufficient to at least get an understanding of whether each of the issues that you're turning up is a real issue or just an individual variation between participants. And because you're running studies week after week, you can always put the same task in a subsequent study to get larger N samples to be more confident that this really is an issue before it needs fixing. So one of the outcomes from a study might be that you and the team agree, we won't do anything yet, we'll wait until the next session to see if there's more people that have this behavior, or if it was just a one-off with a couple of people this time around. But for serious issues, you can unearth them with just a couple of individuals, and that's enough for the team to then know they have to go make a change and make that change and produce a new version of the product for the next session that you're running. No questions from anybody. You're all the people who sit at the back of the room and sit there and don't talk in the training sessions I run. So considering I've been talking nonstop for 36 minutes, that's a pretty good. And I'm probably going to call it quits here. I want to thank everybody who's watching live. If you are watching after the event and you do have a question, you can comment in the comment field for this session. If you're watching after the fact, I'm not sure exactly how that works. I think it does work. And you can also do a couple of other things to get in touch with us. You can send email to chat@stickynotes.chat. That gets to me, Chris Nutter. It gets to the other 2 folks that I run these Sticky Notes chat sessions with, Amanda Stockwell and Cory Lebson too. You can tweet us at Sticky Notes @StickyNotesChat. You can also go see all of our previous episodes at stickynotes.chat. Our website there hosts all of our previous recordings. We're up to number 21 now, so there's lots out there and lots of different topics around user experience. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn, and also follow hashtag. There's being comments as to one location. If you follow that, you will you'll be up to date with everything that we do. Martina's just asked a question. Let's see. I'm going to see what Martina's question was, and we can see what we can whether we can answer that as part of what we're doing. When someone asks you in the middle of a study about what the current state is or what you've heard so far, how do you respond? STFU. Do you mention anything in detail yet, or would you risk people saying, yes, that's enough, we can go with it, no further research needed? Oh my goodness, yes. If somebody asks me in the middle of a session, something like that, I tell them to be really quiet, because they shouldn't be asking me questions, they should be watching. If they're asking me between participants, hey, do you think we've got enough information yet? My normal answer is, hey, we're only running 8 participants because we're expecting 5 of them to show up. If all 5 of them see the same issue, I can be very confident it's an issue. If I've only seen 3 participants so far, how can I tell you whether this is just those 3 participants or whether it's actually something that's an issue? So I typically will not do that. I might say, hey, it looks like we're seeing these trends, but many years into my career, running every single session, I would say pretty much gives me some new insight. When you start running your 15th or 20th participant, yeah, it gets a bit boring and you start seeing the same behaviors over and over again, but it's still individual differences. So when you're only at maybe 3 or 4 participants out of a projected 8 participants, it's very difficult to say at that point, oh, I know what the answer is going to be. You might say, we have some issues, but you might not yet know how to fix those issues because you've only seen the issue occur 4 times. So I'm very reluctant to let the team go off and make fixes, A, based on only 4 participants, and B, without my involvement because I'm still busy running more participants. So who knows what on earth they're going to go off and try and do as a fix, and whether it is actually a fix or whether it's actually more something that could add different problems further down the line. So yeah, Martina, I'd be very worried about actually talking in too much detail about the results. I'm not going to hide things from people. And again, I want people watching the session so they will see it for themselves. But I would caution them about not actually stopping the session until we've actually got all the information we need. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Yes, it does. Thanks, Martina. So yes, I would like you guys to tune in to subsequent sessions we run. So we're not running one next week because it's Thanksgiving in the US, and most of our US US watchers probably wouldn't be interested. B, we've got other things to do on Thanksgiving too, in a socially distanced and socially responsible way. But in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be back with another session talking about how you can get into UX as your first job, or how maybe you could transition into user experience from another role. I know that this is a question we get asked a lot these days from people who see user experience as a career path they're really interested in, but don't really know quite how they could get into this area. So join us in a couple of weeks' time. I believe that is December 3rd, Thursday, December 3rd, 10 Pacific, and 1 Eastern time if you want to ask questions and watch us live, or you can catch it subsequently because these things get recorded, and then they live on LinkedIn, and they also live in YouTube, so you can find them in either of those two places if you want to watch along. And of course you can always find previous episodes on our website, Sstickynotes.chat. Okay, so thank you everybody who was part of this today. Thank you so much for asking questions. It's so good to have people's questions because it means I actually get more inspiration about what to talk about when I'm all here on my own. So that was awesome. Hopefully next time on December 3rd, we'll have both Amanda and Cory back for conversation there on newbies and how to get into user experience. Until then, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.